countless of Americans are wary or even cynical about government. Too many, unfortunately, don't expect much anymore from their officials. Others have just buried their heads and have become apathetic. But even with everything from apathy to cynicism, the current list of scandals has been shocking to millions of angry, confused, sad, upset Americans. Why is this? We're going to examine this tonight. We're honored to have two esteemed guest speakers who, because of who they are and what they do, and whom they represent, will give us great insights. The first is Lori Lowenthal Marcus, and the next is John LEBOUTILLIER. A quick overview of Lori. Lori Lowenthal Marcus is founder and president of Z Street, an international organization that is pro-Israel, pro-truth. She is a talented and brilliant woman, JD from Harvard University, and Masters in Law and Special Policy, and a Master's in Policy and Program Development from Bryn Mawr, and a BA in American Studies from Brandeis University. That is quite a list of places. Ms. Marcus is U.S. correspondent for the Jewish press. She's been featured in the New York Times and on PBS. She writes about Middle East policy for national, local, international media, and was co-host of a Middle East news radio show for 4 years. Lori and her organization were targeted by the IRS. I want to take this opportunity to also thank Debbie Mayer and Irene Alter for sponsoring this wonderful event. A big hand. Please stand up, Irene. Thank you. A warm welcome to Lori Lowenthal Marcus. Philadelphia. There we go. Give her a nice warm welcome. I hope you can hear that, Lori.
Okay.
Okay. Take it away.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you all came. Want to hear about what's happening to the American people because of the American government. My name is Lori Lowenthal Marcus, and I started an organization called Z Street. I started it because I was getting tired of hearing about organizations that attacked Israel in the name of being supportive of Israel. There was a proliferation of organizations like that over the last number of years. And in 2008, I pretty much had it. Particularly when the organization called J Street came out. I don't know if probably everybody there has heard of J Street, am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what really ticked me off is, well, several things. One, right after they were established, they were invited to the White House. Now, excuse me, but most organizations are around for a long time before they are invited inside the White House. Second of all, the J in J Street is not for Jewish. It has nothing to do with Jewish, and that really ticked me off because people assumed. Did the lights go out there?
That way we could see you.
Oh, okay.
We can see you better, Lori.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, so I started the organization with a number of friends who all felt the same way. And 2009, we finally decided, let's go for this. We wrote an article that was published in the American Thinker. That was our way of getting out the word. We had a little tiny article in a publication online, and thousands of people responded because they felt it was time for an organization to be proud of being Zionists and proud of Israel being a Jewish state, and tired of the appeasement which had gone on for too long from too many Jewish and so-called pro-Israel organizations. So that was in the summer of 2009. In November, we got our documents together and incorporated as a nonprofit in Pennsylvania. And then the next step was to file with the IRS for tax-exempt status. So we filed in December of 2009. We didn't hear anything for a while, and then we got a few letters with a number of questions asking for everything we had ever written, published, sent out to anybody, anywhere. I never dealt with the IRS before. I didn't know if it was extraordinary or not. Spent a lot of time gathering the information. In particular, the IRS was interested in getting extensive information about the board members, which some of my board members got very annoyed, and I said, forget it, don't give them any more information, this is ridiculous. But we finally got what we thought was adequate together, sent it in, and then our corporate counsel contacted the agent to whom our file had been assigned, just to find out what was happening with the application. Were they satisfied with what we produced? What would happen next? Whether there was something else they wanted from us. And our lawyer got a hold of the agent finally after 3 phone calls, and the agent said to the lawyer, well, it's going to take a while because we, the IRS, have to look carefully, give special scrutiny to organizations connected to Israel, and that some of those organizations, their files need to be sent to a special unit in Washington, D.C. to determine whether the organization's activities contradict those of this administration's public policies. I'm so glad to hear you make those sounds, because I'm a recovered lawyer. So I knew those words were totally inappropriate and a big, big problem. I was in Israel at the time, and I got the email from our lawyer telling us about the conversations that she had had. This tax lawyer, didn't even realize how inappropriate those questions were. But I did. And the other board member to whom I sent this email immediately, she understood also. And when I returned to the States, we had a board meeting to talk about what would be the right thing to do. And amazingly enough, every member of the board agreed that we had to sue the IRS because what had been described to us was so clearly unconstitutional behavior that to let it go and not say anything, then we would be acting like the Jews we made fun of for not raising their voices when something wrong happened to them. So everybody said, okay, so we're going to be audited, so we're going to have problems. I'm sure that's what's going to happen to us. And I think some of them were kind of kidding, but we filed the lawsuit in August of 2010, stating not that we were demanding the tax-exempt status, but that we were demanding to have a fair and constitutional process applied to our application. And we wanted information about who had come up with the idea that some organizations should have their files be given special scrutiny to make sure that they towed the same line ideologically as this administration. Because we live in the United States of America, and that is not supposed to be the requirement. So we filed the lawsuit, and the response initially from the IRS was, first was, well, we can't sue them because they have governmental immunity. Excuse me? No, not for the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was written by the founders to provide American citizens with protection from the government. It's the only entity to whom it applies. So, I mean, it was really kind of, an inside legal joke, but it was astounding. And then they kept saying, well, you're suing for tax-exempt status, and you're supposed to wait 100 days before there's a procedure that you can go through to try and push the process along. And so they kept telling us, well, that's what you're doing. And as I made clear a couple of minutes ago, that is not what we were doing. We were not seeking the status through the lawsuit. We were seeking constitutional process, fairness, and justice. The next line of response from the government was, oh, sorry, there was one more step. After we filed and after we had this initial briefing, we found out through a third party that a Jewish organization, a purely Kiruv, or outreach, just a religious group, had filed for tax-exempt status, and the questions that that organization received in writing from the IRS included, what are your religious beliefs about the existence of the land of Israel? Who is, what is going on that anyone could put those words together on a piece of paper that comes from the government to a citizen? It's so outrageous. But the organization was terrified, and we never found out the name of the organization. They sent their accountant sent us the questionnaire from the IRS with the first page ripped off, so we couldn't see who the organization is, but we could see that it was, in fact, an IRS document, just like all the IRS letters that they sent out to other organizations, and it's signed by an IRS agent. And in fact, I think, I'll have to check, I think Lois Lerner's name was on it also, which is kind of amusing. So after we filed that, the government sort of took a turn, and then their defense became, well, terrorism, there's a heightened risk of terrorism in Israel. And so it looked like we might be funding terrorists. And that's why it would take a long time to review our application. Now, excuse me, but it's true, terrorism happens in Israel. It happens to Israel, not from Israel. And our organization is we are opposed to terrorism, period. There's, part of our mission statement is that we don't think Israel should negotiate or deal with terrorists. So the idea that we would be supporting terrorism is absurd. Second of all, I'm not sure if any of you can name any place in the world at this point where terrorism doesn't happen. So the fact that there's a heightened risk of terrorism in Israel, right now, any organization that wants to exist in Boston, I guess they're going to be sent to this heightened scrutiny group because terrorism happens in Boston too. So it was really ridiculous. And furthermore, and I think this is where it got into the ideological issue. I think what is happening and was happening, as we've seen with the Tea Party groups, is that Z Street does take positions that are inconsistent with this administration. We are not opposed to Jews living and breathing beyond an arbitrary green line in Israel. But that's our right as American citizens. We are allowed to have those beliefs. And in fact, even if we were giving resources or financial support to entities beyond the green line, it's still not illegal and doesn't cause us to lose or not qualify for tax-exempt status. But the truth is, for Z Street, we weren't giving anything other than ideological support. So it's absolutely terrifying that the IRS, and in their defense, what they think is a positive, a good, strong defense, is to say, well, that's because, essentially Israel is a terrorist state, and you can't give ideological support or have particular beliefs and expect that you could get 501c3 status. The other thing that the IRS did to Z Street is after we filed our documents, they told us in one of their responsive documents that because we sued them, they were putting our application on hold and weren't going to take any further steps on it until the litigation was resolved. Now the problem with that is, first of all, the regulation they cited is totally discretionary. Second of all, it only has to do when there is litigation about the status, not about the constitutional process that I've now said 3 times is what we were suing about. So they really froze us completely. We filed over 4.5 years ago. We still don't have 501c3 status or a rejection. We have nothing. We're in legal limbo. And it's very gratifying that all of this is now coming out because certain conservative groups were targeted incredibly, and they got together and they were heard, thank goodness, by certain people in Washington. And so now the scandal is unfolding. But I'll tell you, it was a pretty darn lonely place to be for these last number of years when, frankly, no Jewish organizations came out and supported us, no pro-Israel organizations came out and supported us. Nobody really cared that this had happened. And it's so important for people to stand up for each other when they stand up as American citizens on their hind legs and say, no, I'm entitled to certain rights and responsibilities because I'm an American. So I know that's what all of you do at this organization, and I'm so glad that Anne runs this program and runs this organization. And I appreciate her asking me, inviting me to come and speak with you. Okay?
Okay. Okay, Kathleen, thank Lori until we'll be back in about 15 minutes.
15 minutes with questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John LeBoutillier is a lifelong resident of Nassau County and a former United States Congressman. Known for his agile mind and acute commentary on political stories, LeBoutillier is Harvard educated through and through. Being a magna cum laude graduate of Harvard College with a master's degree in business administration from Harvard Business School. There are countless other reasons why John LeBoutillier is a nationally recognized political commentator and prolific author. He has contributed to major newspapers including the New York Times, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, to magazines and to online journals including Newsmax.com. He is a commentator, a host, a guest of major media programs on Fox News and on other networks. Just 2 years ago, John joined with noted Canadian broadcaster Arlene Beynon, thank you very much, to launch the first international talk radio show airing simultaneously on WABC Talk Radio in New York and AM 640 in Toronto in the United Kingdom. We are truly honored to have John here with us tonight, so let's give him a big, warm welcome, John LeBoutillier.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Lori, for listening, because we love listening to you. And I'm processing what you said, because I didn't know all that. I had told Anne that I would like to talk tonight about the IRS thing from the bigger perspective. Lori told us about what happened to her and Z Street and her group, which is unbelievable, as Anne said, that in the United States of America in the 21st century, clear anti-Semitism in the U.S. government, even on paper, would be evidenced, is really shocking. But let me put that off for a minute to get to the Tea Party part, and then we're going to come back and connect the dots. Lori is the victim of the IRS abuse of power. That's why we have her with us tonight, and it was great to hear it. Not great that it happened, but we need to hear it. Now, I can't talk from her point of view. I haven't been discriminated against by the IRS. When I applied in 1983 for 501c3 status for this group that I've run for years having to do with POWs left behind in Vietnam, that thing sailed right through. They never questioned the board members. None of the stuff that happened to Lori happened to me 30 years ago at all. So things have changed in the IRS. Now, what I want to talk about just for a few minutes is the bigger picture of what is going on. Is this thing a big political scandal? Is it just confined to the IRS? Or is there signs that this thing is bigger? And I think you know where I'm going, because I think it is bigger. But I want to tell you the story that I read 2 weeks ago about a woman named Colleen Kelly, who should be, and hopefully will be, as infamous in the next couple of weeks as, what's the name?
Lerner.
Lerner?
Lois Lerner.
Lois Lerner, or as Pat Goodell calls her, Lois Lane. Colleen Kelly, the American Spectator reported on this on May 20th. Colleen Kelly is the head of the Union of IRS Workers. There are 120,000 of them. They're unionized. They're federal workers. They have their own union. She's the head of the union. Using White House visitor logs and the Inspector General's report, here's what we now know. That on March 31st, 2010, Colleen Kelly went to the White House and had a meeting with the President of the United States. It says it on the White House visitor logs, meeting with POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, President of the United States. That's the 31st of March, 2010. The next day, April 1st, 2010, the targeting of the Tea Party groups inside the IRS began. Now, it could be a coincidence. Meeting doesn't prove anything. But what we must have is, because of what has gone on, including this story, everything's got to be brought out into the open, including what did this woman say to the president, what did the president say to her, and what did she tell people after she left that meeting. Because the background on this woman is very interesting. She participated in the Obama transition team. She had several other meetings in the White House, and I believe with the president and with the First Lady, and she got a new executive order issued by President Obama giving more autonomy to the IRS workers themselves to decide things, not to have their bosses tell them. So that is a standing executive order. She got it done and bragged about it to her members prior to the March 31st meeting. So here's what's got to happen. Darrell Iss's committee, government oversight, has got to subpoena this woman. And maybe they are, and we don't know it yet. They've got to subpoena her emails and her text messages and everybody she talked to the minute she left the Oval Office that day and the next day or two to find out. Because there are not going to be any tapes, and the White House will never tell us the truth. What went on in that meeting? Here's why we have to know it. The IRS thing, what happened to Lori's group and several other Jewish groups and the Tea Party, is it confined to the IRS? Is the IRS just a rotten agency? Is it just a rotten agency? Or is there something above it telling it to do these things? Is there some political entity that doesn't like Jews and doesn't like conservatives telling these human beings that run the IRS, go screw Jews and screw conservatives? You have our permission. And okay, well, we don't know, yes. We suspect the answer is yes. And then yesterday, we learned in these hearings that the EPA, which has nothing to do with the IRS, the Environmental Protection Agency, was going after conservative-leaning organizations and cutting slack with less regulation on liberal groups. So there we have a separate entity from the IRS, the EPA here, IRS here, both doing the same thing, which implies something above them telling them to do this. Or you could be generous and say that the people in these organizations want to curry favor with the Obama White House, and on their own they decided to do this. But if they did that, you would think they'd want to brag about it. And they would go and tell somebody in the White House, oh, we're screwing over Jews and conservatives, and expecting the White House to say, great, which means the White House knew and allowed it. Because a proper White House, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, should put their foot down and say, we don't do that here. We run elections, we try to win elections, but when we win the election, we run the government. We do not use the government to exact revenge on our enemies. This is improper. When Nixon did it, they tried to impeach him. When he just talked on the tapes about, man, I'd like to sick the IRS on my enemies, there were an article of impeachment drawn up on that alone, even though they never did it. They never did anything at the IRS. This crowd is doing stuff. And the level of outrage is quite minimal in Washington. Now, in America, this thing's having a big effect. We know it already. It's already driven Obama's approval rating in the Quinnipiac poll down 9 points in a month. In the Wall Street Journal, you know, in the new Wall Street Journal NBC poll that came out today, he has plummeted among independent voters in the last month, so it is beginning to hurt him politically. But I don't really care about Obama at the moment. What I care about is what is going to do the investigating to get us to the answer to the question that I'm raising, and I'm sure Lori concurs with this. Who high up in the government, or how high up in the government, is the order coming from to use government agencies to punish our enemies? Okay, that's what we have to know. If it's just inside these bureaucracies, okay, we need to know it. It still doesn't make it any better. The IRS is a rotten institution, rotten to the core. I think we knew that anyway, but now we know new things about it. But if there's White House involvement, then we're talking a big problem, a big scandal, and we need to know it. Now, under Watergate, people forget when Watergate began. The break-in was in June '72. It gets in the news, but the thing doesn't really percolate till after the election. The winter of '72, '73, it starts to pick up. The establishment media would not do it. The big shot reporters at the Washington Post said, it's no big story. It took these two guys, Woodward and Bernstein, who were on the city desk to pursue this thing. And they pursued it. No one else paid attention for a while. And then when they really got traction, they got the scandal going. Then came the Irvin Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, Special Prosecutor, all of it. It didn't get to Nixon for a long time. It took a long time. And it was the mega scandal ever because of the taping system. If there were no tapes, Nixon does not leave office. There aren't going to be tapes of Obama sitting in there saying, screw these Tea Party people. I'm sure they're not going to be tapes. But there may be emails and other things like texting and all that are going to take us into the White House. And when we get into the White House, and don't forget, the White House may be involved in subpoenaing reporters' phone records, which ticks off some people in the press. So we may be getting some allies there too eventually. But this is just beginning. We're only 3 weeks into this stuff. So I have hopes that somehow between all the media that we have out there and the Republicans in the House, that something is going to get us to the answer. Where, how high up the food chain did this thing go? Did it go to the Oval Office? That's what we really all want to know. And I find it hard to believe that a president of the United States who, as a candidate, ran the entire campaign. He reviewed every commercial, obviously every speech. He was in on the hiring of every field worker. I mean, everything. This guy used to, in 06 and 07, when he's running for president, it's a famous story. He brings in some guy to interview. He's a senator now, he's running for president. Some guy applies for a job. And he goes in to meet Senator Obama. And Obama says to him, the guy wants to be a field organizer. And Obama says, why should I hire you? Because I am the best field organizer in my campaign. I'm the best speechwriter in my campaign. I'm the best advertising maker. I am the best field man. Why should I hire you to work for me? Now, the arrogance of saying such a thing tells you a little bit about Obama. Now, if he's that way as a candidate, that involved in everything, is it believable that as president, he doesn't know what's going on the night of Benghazi? He doesn't know that Petraeus is under federal investigation while he's head of the CIA, which is incredible to think. The FBI is investigating the CIA director, and the president is not apprised of this? Can't be. He doesn't know that the IRS is doing all this stuff. But his chief of staff knew, and his White House counsel knew, and they say we don't even tell the president. How is this possible? He should be removed for lack of involvement in the government. So we have a lot to find out, but it's going to happen. We have to know these things. And we should not be doing it with hatred towards Obama. We should just want to know the facts. If the facts lead us somewhere, great. If they don't, fine. But let's find out. We have a right to know. Now, I want to get to one thing with Lori. Her thing is a little different than the Tea Party. Tea Party, I could see them targeting the Tea Party and screwing up their applications and all that. And in the political world, I almost take it as part of the game. Not so when you're Jewish. This is just not right to discriminate against people because they're pro-Israel, because they're Jewish, because we've taken it now from the Cincinnati office into something in Washington that Lori referred for some special look. It sends a shiver up my spine. And thank God she's here and speaking. But she ought to be on the Today Show tomorrow morning. I'm going to stop. I know this nice lady has a question for Lori, and anybody who has questions for Lori or for me, let's get to it.
Okay.
I would like to know what is the status of the lawsuit that you instituted against the IRS. What has happened?
Lori, did you understand the question?
Yes, she wants to know what's happening with the lawsuit. We have our first, we filed the lawsuit in August of 2010. In July of 2013, we will have our first court hearing, and that is only to decide whether or not the IRS gets to dismiss our complaint. We don't even have an answer yet to the complaint from the IRS. So it is monumentally slow. I don't know why, but it is really obscene, and it stopped us cold.
Going to work today, I tuned in Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh had a very interesting commentary on our president. He said that in Nazi Germany, there was never a law written to get the Jews. It was never brought out as a law. But what Hitler did is that he hired people who thought like him. This is what Rush said is happening today, that Obama is just hiring people who think exactly like him.
And not that it's really relevant, but I don't think what Rush said is true. I think there were laws passed in the 1930s in Germany against Jewish ownership of things, specifically targeting Jews.
Disarming them?
What?
No, not to kill.
Oh, not to kill, but...
No.
My question is for Lori. What is the status of J Street? Do they have tax-free status?
Yes, they have 501c3, but they also have 501c4, and they have, I think, 527 status. So they have several different statuses. I would love to know how long it took them to achieve their statuses. So they're allowed to do many things, and I know lots of Jewish organizations allow them to come in and speak because they say, well, it's a nonprofit, they're allowed to, and then what they're speaking about is political speech, which they're allowed to as a C4, but that's not how they got into the room. But I do want to make another point about J Street, which is J Street put out a statement in the spring of 2010, that's after we had filed for our tax-exempt status, and in their statement they echoed an article that had been in the New York Times, which called for the Treasury Department and for Congress to withhold tax-exempt status from organizations that support Jews living over the Green Line. So I don't know where it started. J Street said, Jeremy Ben-Ami, the president, said his organization is President Obama's flocking back, or something, one of those. Some football analogy I don't quite get, but it's not good for us.
It's fullback.
And so you have J Street, you have the New York Times, and you have the White House sort of doing things in concert. But I will say that just because J Street called for it and just because the New York Times wrote about it doesn't mean that the IRS then has to go ahead to act on that. So it's pretty ugly. There is an involvement with J Street. They certainly do, but you know what? CARE, which was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land trial, the largest terrorism finance trial in the history of the United States, CARE was named, and CARE, lots of CARE chapters have 501c3 status, but Z Street couldn't get it.
Your slides, please.
Question.
Lori, God bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm an Italian Christian kid who supports Israel more than a lot of Jews do here in this country. And I don't understand that. I have a blue and white ribbon hanging in my car. I go to rallies to support Israel. My question is, aside, and again, it'd be great if you could get up in front of Congress like some of these other, people that are being attacked. It's great to have the faces on television, but it'd be great to have you up there to speak for that independent group of Jews that maybe reach in their pockets and send money to Washington to support these clowns when maybe they're on the fence. And if they hear something about the word Jewish being attacked, maybe they'll think about themselves as being Jewish instead of socialists or communists or Marxists. And you're the voice. I think you're the voice, and you might be. My question is. Yes, I'm sorry. My question is there any chance of you getting in front of Congress and speaking the way we're hearing this last week or so? Thank you.
Well, you're getting me at a bad moment because I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I have been extremely depressed because I asked if we could come and testify, and we were turned down. We were told, no, we're not going in that direction. And I think it's because we're not a political organization. And unfortunately, Washington is so politicized that unless it's the enemy or the good guys, you can't be heard. But, we're this tiny organization. We had this terrible thing happen to us. We have been completely stopped by the IRS from having freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. And yet, the congressional investigation committees, they were interested in hearing our story, but we didn't fit their narrative either. So we haven't been invited to come and speak, and I find that really hurtful. I feel like we were being discriminated against again.
Last question. John?
For John, yeah. First of all, I believe that the UN ambassador just appointed is anti-Israel. I can't remember her name, but I'm pretty sure.
Powers. No, Powers.
Power.
She replaces Rice. But in any case, my question is, 5 years ago, I don't think we ever would have believed this is happening. 5 years from now, we'll be in the same room saying, we can't believe through Obamacare that our families are being systematically killed in hospitals. And I think that will be the case. How do we dismantle the IRS and get rid of it, and get rid of Obamacare?
The thing that was really depressing to me is about 2 weeks ago, this IRS thing had just sort of started to come to the news. And the House of Representatives, like on a Wednesday or Thursday night, voted overwhelmingly to repeal Obamacare, which is a waste of time. You can pass the thing in the House. It doesn't even get brought up for a vote in the Democratic Senate. It's a symbolic, wasted vote. The smart thing is what you said. The IRS is discrediting itself every day. We learn more. The conferences, the money, the Star Trek videos, the abuse of power, all this. And by the way, if I were running that committee, I would bring these Jewish organizations in on purpose. I want to disrupt the Jewish community in America who loves Obama and make them think. Because the theme that I think runs through all of it is what I said before. These Chicago politicians use government to screw their opponents. And Lori is an opponent. Lori is pro-Israel, against going back to the 67 lines and all that, and that doesn't fit the Obama team. Obamacare would have fallen if Chief Justice Roberts hadn't become a wimp last summer. But it would still fall today, and I think this is a possibility. You put a bill in, it'll pass the House, but you want a bill that could go to the Senate in an election year, 2013 and 14, next year, and get Democratic senators to agree to take the IRS part out of Obamacare. That they become a discredited entity. You can't have them judging the mandate, collecting the money. Take them out. Now, how many Democrat senators and running next year for re-election are going to vote against that? They'll be getting murdered at home if they come out and defend the IRS. That's the move. But Republicans are stupid. They don't ever do any of this stuff.
A question for John. And this question is about a special prosecutor. Is that going to happen? How do we get around the appointment of a special prosecutor by the Attorney General? This question of having a...
You don't trust Eric Holder?
To prosecute himself?
Is it likely to happen? Can a special prosecutor be fair? And I think also in Lori's case, this would, she would have the opportunity to testify with a special prosecutor.
Okay. Good question. Okay, is that echo okay?
It's coming out of the...
Okay, here's the thing. First of all, there used to be a law authorizing the creation of a special prosecutor. The law expired back in the early 2000s. Bush and the Republicans didn't want any special prosecutors ever going against them, so they never renewed the law. So, there are two ways to get a special prosecutor. One would be what the gentleman referred to, the President through the Attorney General can appoint one. The problem is they are not viewed as independent because they're appointed by the Attorney General, who's part of the problem. The other way would be for Congress to reauthorize the law, create the Special Counsel Act, or whatever it was called. They haven't done it. That's possible. But I'm not sure we want a special prosecutor, because what happens is the minute you get one, it all becomes a black hole. Everything goes in secret. The testimony, the subpoenas, who they're talking to. We have no way of finding out. It goes on for years before the guy or the gal ends up making recommendations for prosecution. The best way, maybe eventually, but the House of Representatives needs to create, I think, 2 select committees. One on the IRS to elevate this thing to super importance and really investigate the hell out of it. I don't think Congressman Issa is credible enough to be doing the investigation of the IRS and his committee's investigating Benghazi. How can he do both? So I would take it all away from him, create a select committee a la Sam Ervin and the Watergate Committee, and do just the IRS. And I'd probably, because most Republicans want it, have another select committee to do Benghazi and get to the bottom of that. And those things are in public. They're congressmen who are jerks, but at least they're on TV and you know about it. The special prosecutor is a black hole. It could be 2 or 3 years, we never hear anything. That's what I worry about.
Please stand, Irene. And by the way, Lori, this is Irene Alters asking a question now.
Hi, Lori. Can you hear me?
I can see you, but I hear you.
We're so excited that you were able to do this tonight. I have a couple of questions, actually. First of all, were you aware that Jeff Weisenfeld had started an organization called the Israel Independence Fund, and that during that time, it took 15 months for them to get, they finally did get an IRS, I guess 501c3, but the lawyers commented that at that time they just couldn't understand why they were putting them through so much and all the questions. So I don't know, but that was one of the questions. The other one is in relation to Samantha Power now being going to be the ambassador. Do you want to kind of bring that up and discuss that at all? Are you as upset about that as we all are right now? And the other thing is, on July 2nd, is that when the hearing is? Would you want, or would you encourage other people to be at that hearing in D.C., or we can have other people that are interested and supporters of Z Street be at your hearing at in Washington, D.C. on July 2nd?
Okay, so it won't make a difference to the judge. It might make a difference to the media, and the only reason that matters is because if the media decides that an issue is important, it thereby becomes important. So, so from that perspective, it could be useful. It's going to be in Washington, D.C., so I don't know how many people can go there or be there. But I certainly hope it would make a difference to the judge. The judge that we have is a new Obama, of course, appointee, so it's a little troublesome, but let's hope she's fair. Samantha Power is terrifying that she's going to be the U.S. ambassador to the UN. She, I don't think, will have any hesitation to try and, in her own sweet way, blackmail Israel in order to provide any cover to Israel in that forum where the United States used to be Israel's best friend. That's terrifying. I didn't know that Jeff had a 501c3 group that took 15 months to approve. I will talk to him about it. What really matters is to find out the timing. Most Jewish groups would not, Jewish and or pro-Israel groups, they're not necessarily the same thing. We're so afraid of coming forward that most of them are still not being public about this. And the more that we can show that other groups were targeted because of their political and or religious beliefs, the more Congress will pay attention. You know, it should be, you know, the IRS agent told us what they were doing. She had no idea it was wrong. That's how common it was. So there's got to be a lot of groups that had this experience, but everyone is afraid of the IRS, and now we know with good reason. But it's very hard to get people to come forward and talk about their experiences, at least in the Jewish and the pro-Israel committee. I'll tell you that one, and I won't tell you the name, but one of the best known big, major, bold pro-Israel organizations, right after we filed, I got a call at home, not, you go girl, but now you're going to screw up our 501c3. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing on this Samantha Power deal? She's not yet the UN ambassador. She does have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. The odds are today she would be confirmed. But if there's a real strong feeling, first of all, among American Jews, that she is bad news for Israel, then someone ought to run a campaign against her and get these Democrats. The Republicans could be, they'll vote against her. But you need Democrats to vote against her. And maybe you can get them if the Jewish community gets up in arms about it. The thing that kills me is I watch the majority of Jews in this country vote for Obama in 2008. By 2010, I read these pieces in magazines, oh, the Jewish community's up in arms against Obama, they can't stand his policies, he's the most unpopular American president ever in Israel, and all this and that. Boom, by 2 years later in 2012, 68% of them vote for him again. So there's got to be a consequence to his positions where someone punishes him for taking a position that's contrary to the Jewish community and to Israel. And maybe she should be the one. Now, the conservatives aren't dumb all the time. They took on Susan Rice and they stopped her from being Secretary of State on this Benghazi thing, on one thing, the talking points. They ruined her for that. There's got to be something on this Samantha Power, another Harvard person, Lori, and focus up on one thing and beat her on it. It'd be great.
We got Hagel.
Yeah. Yeah, hi.
They came against Hagel. What good did it do? We got Hagel.
Yeah, hi. Steve Morris here. You know, as the co-founder of the Nassau Queens County Tea Party, this is like old hats for us. This is like been going on for years. And a turning point in my life was 3 years ago when we got my wife and I got death threats at my house. So we sort of like look now at the Tea Party like, you know, guys, where you been? You know? What she went through with her organization is like normal, common. This is not abnormal. But the Republican Party, as well as the Democratic Party, have vilified us, and that's it. My question is pretty simple. Samantha Power gave a speech 3 years ago in which she said that she advocates military power against Israel to protect the Palestinians. The second point in that speech was the Jewish, educated, wealthy people in this country control foreign policy. That's what her speech was. I believe it was at Harvard. My question to you, both of you, is, you know, I'm more worried now because I've sort of given up on this stuff. I'm more worried now about, we have people in our groups that will not put their names on our groups anymore, that will not give us email addresses anymore, will not even say, but they'll support us, but privately. This is my question to both of you. Is this going to be the way? They have made the point. You screw us, Internal Revenue or somebody will get your name. Do you think there's any way that we can restore the freedom that we had 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 years ago?
Who are you directing that question towards?
Both of them.
Oh, good. Okay. Bro?
You want me to go first? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay. I think that it depends what happens in Congress with the information that is gathered from the IRS. If serious concrete action is taken, I think that there will be a hold, there will be a pause in the inexorable movement forward for government agencies to accrete powers to themselves. If, on the other hand, Congress moves on to the next scandal, as is their wont, look to the next way of getting the camera to come and cover them, then I think it will really continue to be worse and worse and whoever is in power, the other groups will be treated horribly. The death threats is, I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. We do still live in the United States of America. I hope that there is an appropriate response to that. And I hope that people came forward and helped you. But I do know that the Republican Party and the Democratic parties did vilify the Tea Party. And maybe this ability to vindicate yourselves, and I feel to some extent ourselves, showing that this is what the government did. We're not imagining this. They took what was totally inappropriate action against citizens, and yet at the same time, they were having these unbelievable conferences and spending millions of dollars on their free time for their fun times. That is outrageous. So if the IRS gets away with it, I think we're doomed. I really do. On the other hand, if serious consequences befall them, it will be better for a while. That's my guess.
I must give a big warm thank you to John.
Thank you, everybody.
Lori, I was going to ask John this, but actually I'm sure you would have an opinion on this. There are those that think it's a conspiracy theory, that in fact this IRS scandal has been going on for some time and it's only breaking now because it's really an effort to obfuscate something even more sinister, maybe our nuclear disarmament. I'm sorry, this was really more directed at John, but if you have any thoughts on this, I'd like to hear them.
I did think that the reason Lois Lerner was told to leak that question, to set up that question about the IRS looking at the Tea Party groups on a Friday afternoon, when you know the slowest news day of all is Saturday, that's how you kill something. But I thought it was because they were trying to divert attention from the Benghazi scandal. And it has. It really has. It's taken a lot of attention. Everybody on the planet in the United States hates the IRS. Everyone has had a bad experience or is afraid of having a bad experience. So I did think, I mean, it's just my opinion, but it seemed to me that that is why it happened when it did. Which, I'm involved in this IRS scandal personally. It's very important to me, but I have to say, as a human being and as an American, the Benghazi scandal is far more frightening in many ways. It's horrifying to think that we didn't respond when an ambassador or people over there fighting for us, protecting us, when they were in danger. What is that? That's unbelievable. I mean, people really should be fired. I want to know. Hillary Clinton didn't answer the phone? What? So I think it was about Benghazi. That's my take.
Last question.
Lori, I just wanted to ask you quickly, I know you can't say the names of the other Jewish organizations who were harassed, but I wondered if you had any estimate about how many. And the other question is, what does the J in J Street stand for?
I don't know the numbers for the Jewish organizations. I don't know, because people won't talk about it. I only found out about that particular group. I got the questions from the IRS that had been sent to that organization purely coincidentally. Now, I can't believe that that was the only group they asked that set of questions to. So I don't know how big it is. I can't give you numbers. I know it's, definitely larger than just us. Now, also, we were filing for tax-exempt status during a particular period of time. Other pro-Israel organizations, were already in existence, so I don't know if they were treated differently. So what was the other question? Because I haven't. Oh, J. The J is not Jewish. The J is for in Washington, D.C. The streets. There's a K Street and an L Street, and there's all kinds. But there's no J Street amongst, the K is for that's where the lobbyists are. So they are, the voice that isn't heard. Give me a break. They got millions from Soros and all those other guys, but they're representing the voice that isn't heard.
Thank you.
Please, let's thank Lori Lowenthal Marcus. What an exceptional evening tonight. And I think we're going to hear much more about what Lori is going through. And you know what? If we don't, let's make it heard. What do you say? Yes, sir. What is...
You just mentioned something that was very interesting. To what extent is George Soros involved?
George Soros. Okay.
Because he's responsible.
Now there's a whole other evening.
I know that he was involved in setting up what was the predecessor to J Street. They, I think, made a decision that they weren't going to go forward because his name was already linked. They then, whoever they are, set up J Street, denied that they got funding from Soros. I was just looking at their 990s recently. Even though they said that they didn't get funding from Soros, Soros and his family had given like a third of the entire budget for J Street a number of years ago. So it's one of those Soros groups, for sure.
I want to thank Chris Roberto also. Chris is a really dear friend of mine. Chris, come up for a second. And because of him, we were able to actually speak with Lori tonight. So thank you, Chris.